Welcome back, all, for another episode of Championship Review. My name is Rusty, and I'll be taking you through a URC Week 2 recap. So, to start, just a quick overview of the games that took place over the course of the second week of the URC season. Unfortunately, weather got the best of two games this week, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail in a minute here. And let's start off with the first game of the weekend, which was the DHL Stormers versus the Ospreys. The results of the game showed DHL Stormers 26, Ospreys 10. I will say, when I was watching this game was extremely competitive and extremely tight and close for the first 55 minutes or so of the game. Once that 55-minute mark hit, Stormers surged ahead, took their 16-point lead, and never looked back. And this is the deficit that was held for the rest of the game. So let's take a quick look at the stat line real quick. We have Stormers in the blue, Ospreys with the black ink, and there's just a couple things that I wanted to zoom in on and really focus in on for this game, which I think kind of tells the tale of this game, especially since it's pretty much the story of two halves here. So the first thing we're going to zoom in on is possession and territory. You've got first half stats, second half stats. They completely flip-flopped first half to second half. So first half, Ospreys were in complete control, possession territory, flip-flopped completely in the second half. As you can see, Stormers completely dominated in the second half with possession territory. The next thing I would like to zoom in on, it's kind of all four of these, is turnovers won, penalties, defenders beaten, plus line breaks. As you can see, the blue numbers are all favorable for the Stormers. Stormers turned the Ospreys over more, conceded less penalties, beat twice as many defenders, and had 4 times the amount of line breaks, leading to more fast break opportunities and more scoring opportunities for the Stormers. Second game on Friday's slate, unfortunately, was one of 2 games that was postponed this weekend. What I imagine is going to happen is during some international break period, this game plus the other game is going to be made up. So, for example, when the Six Nations is on, we may see Edinburgh, and also Ulster also make up those games while the Six Nations is going on. Our third and final game for Friday was Dragons versus Sharks. We almost had history made. Dragons almost won a game. But I think weather had a big impact on this game. It was raining down in sheets. You could tell that the wind was swirling as the game was being played. But very close game. The only thing that was a big difference between the two teams was the forward pack. South African scrum, probably no surprise, was extremely dominant this game. It just, every single time there was a scrum, Sharks were pushing the Dragons back, and Dragons had to be quick on their own feet if they had any intentions on actually winning their own ball on their own feed. So let's look at their stat line real quick. We've got Dragons in this yellowish gold color, and Sharks are in the black color. If you just look down this stat line, it does not look like a stat line that would showcase the Dragons would even come close to tying the game. So the fact that Dragons had less territory, less possession, had 100 less meters made, turned the ball over more penalties, less defenders beaten. This is a stat line that looks like the Dragons would come out on the losing side of things, but Dragons, a lot of courage, a lot of effort, going into their game, and they were able to come up with the tie, play pretty well for the tie, and maybe they'll finally get a win starting next week. Now, the big thing that I wanted to zoom in on is meters carried and penalties conceded. 250 versus 350, 100 meters less as far as meters carried goes, plus 15 penalties for the Dragons versus 8 for the Sharks. Again, not stats that you would see in a game that would end up being a tie. Normally, those are things where it's like, Dragons were on the losing end, Sharks on the winning end. But again, the effort put forward by the Dragons, really, really strong effort, which kept them from taking the loss this week. Next game here was the second postponed game of this weekend's games. Unfortunately, Scarlets and Connacht also postponed. Similar to Edinburgh and Ulster, this game will more than likely be made up during an international break period, possibly during the Six Nations, or I know there's fall international friendlies that are taking place, and this game could be made up then as well. So let's move on to the second game of Saturday's games. We had a very, very tight game between Benetton and Glasgow. From what I understand, Glasgow was dominant in the first half, and Benetton was the team that was dominant in the second half. So this was a game of momentum swings here. And let's look at the stat line. That'll tell us a lot here. So we have Benetton in the green, Glasgow with the black. And let's just go in and zoom in on possession and territory here. As you can see, it's tale of two halves again. Big momentum swings. First half momentum, very much with Glasgow. Second half momentum, very much with Benetton. Possession stats, very easily favored. Glasgow in the first half, flip-flopped to Benetton in the second half. Exact same thing with the territory stats as well. A little further down the sheet here, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me on how Benetton was able to get back into the game is penalties conceded. 8 penalties for Benetton, 15 for Glasgow. Everybody knows discipline can be the Achilles heel of any great team. So Benetton with pretty much half the amount of penalties conceded versus Glasgow, probably what allowed Benetton to get back into the game and get the victory over Glasgow. Our next game is the rematch of the championship game, and honestly, it did not disappoint. Bulls came out real quick at the beginning, which kind of made me a little nervous that Leinster's week 1 performance was going to be more of a habitual thing, but Leinster turned it around, fought back really hard to get back into this game, ended up being a very, very entertaining, very high-scoring game to watch. And if we look at the stats here, Leinster with blue, Bulls have the black ink. Again, it's momentum shifts like we've seen with a lot of other games this week. First and second half differences. Again, possession and territory for me tell a lot to the story here. You can see possession more so was favored Leinster first half, and then the Bulls in the second half. Territory was 50-50 in the first half, and then really swung to the Bulls' favor in the second half, which to me is probably a reason as to why the Bulls were able to, maintain their lead and have a lead going into the second half. And as we move on to our next game, we have another close game here between Munster and Cardiff. It's a close game start to finish. Munster pack dominated yet again, just like last week against the Scarlets. And got to give credit to Cardiff where credit is due. They did what they could to fight back into the game, and they also left with 2 losing bonus points, which could be big, going towards the end of the season. And if we look into the stats here real quick, Munster in the red, Cardiff with the black. And let's just take a quick look at possession territory. I'll zoom in on that. And possession, again, even Stevens split first half and then favored Munster in the second half. Territory-wise, was completely in favor of Munster the entire game. So again, really good for Cardiff to fight their way back into the game. When you give up more territory and let Munster have the majority of the territory, could potentially be a little bit challenging. But Cardiff did the best that they could and was able to keep it a close game and leave with losing bonus points. A little bit further down the stat line here, it was interesting for me to see the difference in just the tackle stats here. Let's just look at the tackles made. 184 for Munster, 118 for Cardiff. Good on Munster for having just great defensive discipline and playing defense extremely well. What I also see here too is the turnovers won 12 versus 8. So despite the fact that Munster may have been playing defense a little bit more, they were able to turn the ball over more and use that to their advantage for the entire course of the game. So let's move on to our next game here, which was the last game of the weekend. This was a super exciting game to watch. Zebri Parma, a much, much better team than I would have ever thought they were. Super strong on defense. They were able to turn the ball over. That first half between the two teams here was completely dominated by Zebri. And then in the second half, there was a yellow card. Forget by which player, but there was a yellow card received by Parma, which that is what really lit a fire under the Lions. Having that extra space on the field allowed the Lions to get back in the game. Got to tip your hat to Zebri Parma here. They fought all the way till the end of the game and were able to win on a last-minute pick-and-go try from their forward pack. And if we take a look at the stat line here, we've got Lions with the red, Zebri with the black. And, it's very similar to pretty much all of the games that we've been seeing this week. Possession stats favored one team in the first half and then flip-flopped to the other team in the second half. Same thing with territory. However, in the second half for this particular game, it ended up being an even 50-50. One of the biggest things I saw was Zebri's defensive ability to stop the Lions' attack, showcased by the 10 turnovers won by Zebri versus the 8. So there were plenty of times Lions got the ball rolling, had offensive momentum, and then Zebri just stopped them because they turned the ball over. So great defensive effort is in part what allowed Zebri to get this victory against the Lions this past week. So really nice to see, really fun to see there as well. Moving on, what we have here is a live ladder of the rankings of the teams. We got Bulls up at the number 1 position right now. Stormers, Munster, Zebri right behind them. All of those teams are undefeated at 2-0. And then at the bottom, we have Leinster and Scarlets picking up the bottom. We'll see what goes on with that as the season progresses. And to finish up, we have a live look at the games slated for Week 3. So I hope everybody enjoys Week 3's games. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you next week.